Good morning. You're on the air.
Doug, Richard Holowell.
Hey, Rich. How are you doing, sir? Yes, a little technical difficulties there, but not too bad for a Friday morning. And Friday morning, it's very early for you. You're in Los Angeles. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually, beautiful Newport Beach. St. Augustine on the other side. We're two of the most wonderful places in the country.
Well, very, very nice. Now, Rich, tell us a little bit about what you do and your company, please.
Well, since 1971, I've been involved in the evaluation, management, and turnaround of real estate and real estate-related assets, going back way before the RTC days, the first REIT crash of 1971. And BBK is a global professional services firm that functions in 20 different industries, providing turnaround management, access to markets for firms that are really financially troubled. And really what we do is try to improve their performance, keep them out of a bankruptcy. If we need to go through a reorganization process, we'll help them in that process and be an advocate to try to help them come out successfully on the other side. That could involve, in our case, real estate developers of all size, and of course, commercial banks, which we've got a lot of experience in.
Well, excellent. You and I have worked before many years ago during the RTC days. Do you remember that auction, and can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, we had 1,400 distressed assets in our RTC portfolio down in Florida, and as I recall, we did an auction on a multifamily project, which turned out to be very successful. That was one of the methods that we used to expedite the recovery on the assets that were delegated to us by the RTC, and I see over the course of the next year, the whole auction route probably ramping up a little bit more than it has in the last, year or two.
Mm-hmm.
And we can talk a little bit about that. Part of that is related to new pressure, which is going to be coming on the community banking sector. As I met with a very high-level official of the FDIC just a couple of months ago, there was an off-the-record comment that the pent-up losses that are unrecognized and actually not shown on the books of community banks are still very large, and the pressure will be coming down to shed those assets. And I think one of the methods, because these are assets that are typically $800,000-$900,000 average balances, both commercial and residential, I think the auction route may be something that becomes fashionable for the whole community banking sector.
I got it. That's great. And yes, we did have a great auction there in Miami, and it was right after Hurricane Andrew, if I remember correctly, and South Miami area, and the whole area was devastated, and that particular apartment complex was again, really crumbled, and it was about half fixed and half not fixed, and again, we really worked hard with you, and you did a great job. Let's look into your crystal ball. Tell us some things that you think will be trends in the future.
Well, what's interesting, since we kind of called the perfect storm of trouble coming upon the real estate industry in Florida in 2005, and I guess the crystal ball was certainly working at that point. One thing that we've seen is that every quarter since the start of '06, something different has been going on regulatory-wise, trouble-wise, capital market-wise, and really it's been no different the last 4 or 5 months. A few things that we actually see happening as of late, and let's just talk about the last 6 months, is number one, for commercial developers, bankruptcy is becoming a very fashionable way for developers and owners to try to hang on to their properties. Reason being, equity in those properties is creeping back. If you talk about where we were 18 months ago,
mm-hmm.
a lot of these loans were 30%, 40% underwater. And as the equity has creeped back, as the economy has improved, and as real estate values have been going back up, we've seen a lot of folks across the country using the Chapter 11 bankruptcy route. And as part of that, getting a testifying expert to talk about valuation of the properties and also what an interest rate should be in what they call a cram-down procedure. And in that procedure, the lender that's already there is basically made by the judge to stay in the deal a little bit longer at a predetermined interest rate. And we really saw the tide turning on that about 6 months ago. We're providing expert testimony in a lot of those cases now. And I think that's something that's going to probably continue at least for another year. So that's probably one of the trends that is right on top of us right now.
For the general public, again, crammed down process may not be a term that they're knowledgeable about. Can you tell us just a little bit about that in the bankruptcy setting?
Well, in a bankruptcy case, the real reason for Chapter 11 is to try to allow the debtor to reorganize itself and come out the other side. And as long as you can offer a reasonable interest rate to the lender, he should not be allowed necessarily to take that property back through foreclosure.
Okay.
And to the extent a testifying expert comes on and says, look, the value is very close to what the debt is. And number two, because you really can't go out and get a 100% loan to value to take that lender out, you can have a judge, you can put on testimony before a judge that says, because interest rates are so low, this lender should be made to be grant an extended loan at 4% or 5%.
Mm-hmm.
And as long as they get their interest payments where they're not hurt and their principal isn't impaired, judges are giving borrowers time for additional leases to be signed, for the market to come back, for values to continue to go up so that that borrower doesn't have to be put through the whole bankruptcy process and lose his property. And we're seeing this being successfully done in a lot of different jurisdictions.
Oh, excellent. Any more trends that you see?
Well, another one that we're seeing, as you know, Doug, starting in 2007, there were dozens and dozens of real estate hedge funds that raised money from their investors to buy distressed assets. And as you also know, between 2007 and 2009, the banks really didn't want to shed those assets at any kind of great velocity. And with that said, a lot of this money that was raised has gotten very impatient because it has not been employed in distressed real estate. Now, we just came back from a large conference in New York where you probably had 300 of these hedge funds that had raised billions of dollars. And one thing that I'm hearing on the street is that if the money doesn't go out by the end of this year, a lot of these hedge funds, as it relates to their real estate distressed asset purchase funds, are going to be shut down.
Uh-huh.
So we're seeing some activity around where more aggressive prices are being paid for distressed real estate. And still, with that said, because the banks are only mildly ambitious to sell assets,
Mm-hmm.
I think what we're going to see is a lot of these folks actually will have to shut down their funds. So if somebody's looking for money, and of course that's one of the things we do, we have 3 offerings in the market now where we're raising about $600 million between the 3. It's a good time to be looking for money if you know where to go.
Okay. And anything else as far as a trend?
Yeah, I guess probably the final thing is, on the heels of real estate downturns, you usually see a wave of litigation where folks have figured out how much their losses have been. They're somewhat licking their wounds and
Right.
they're looking to blame somebody. And we have seen a real outbreak of different types of real estate-related litigation over the course of the last 9 months. And as we started getting calls for expert testimony work in the fourth quarter of last year, that has blossomed into on and putting expert testimony on about what real estate conditions were at the point these loans were made, who did what to whom, who was acting improperly, was somebody bending the rules, was there lender liability, and because we've been through so many of these wars over the years, we're called on to be experts, and I really see this wave of litigation probably lasting 2 more years at any rate, even though I think we all know that because of a lack of mark-to-market, we'll likely be talking about a few of these same issues 3 years from now.
Well, Rich, thank you so much for calling in. Again, you've been on my show before. You are an expert in this area, and we go back a long way. Tell us how people can reach you, please.
Well, I could be reached in my Newport Beach office at 213-631-6116 or at Holowell at bbkholdings.com.
Excellent. Hey, Rich, thank you so much for a great interview. You have a wonderful weekend.
Always a pleasure, Doug.
All right. Well. Take care.